I've reached my breaking point and can't take it any longer. I've been head over heels for this woman for what feels like ages, maybe even a few years now. I'm torn between letting go of these feelings or trying to build something with her. I first met my ex-wife, who happens to be her sister, when I was 24. Our relationship progressed rapidly, and by the time I was 27, we had a son and a daughter, and were married. Sadly, just months into our marriage, my ex-wife had an affair and got involved with hard pills. When I confronted her, she promised to seek help, but instead disappeared overnight. It's been 4 years since I last heard from her, and rumor has it she's living on the streets in Los Angeles with the guy she cheated with. With my focus on keeping things together for my kids, I don't have the energy or desire to track her down after what she did. I eventually got a divorce in her absence, but managed to maintain a great relationship with my former in-laws. My kids spend every other weekend with their grandparents, who still treat me like family. We avoid discussing my ex to protect my children's feelings. My son, who's now 9, has been deeply affected by his mother's departure and even needed therapy after expressing a wish that she passed. She had become verbally offensive towards the end when he was around 5 or 6. In the year after my ex left, her sister and her boyfriend started visiting more often to help with the kids. They babysit, claiming it was good practice since they wanted kids at their own. My children adored them and were showered with love and attention, which was a welcome change. They eventually got married and had a daughter, but tragically, her husband passed in a work accident soon after. As you can imagine, it's been a heart-wrenching experience for everyone involved. Taking a cue from my sister-in-law, I started looking after her daughter to give her some much-needed alone time. She's been attending grief counseling for a while, but still wears her wedding ring and can't fathom dating again. We often talk about her late husband, and although she's in a better place now, she's still very much in love with him. I can't even begin to comprehend that kind of pain. Over the past couple of years, we've become more involved in each other's lives. My kids adore their aunt, and she comes over for dinner a few times a week. Our daughters have grown close and enjoy spending time together, often having sleepovers. While I've moved on from my ex, the fear of dating someone as dangerous as their mother has kept me out of the dating game. I'm not sure when it began, but gradually, I started developing feelings for my sister-in-law. She's an amazing mom considering everything she's been through. She's one of the kindest people I know, and her sense of humor never fails to make me laugh and feel happy. I then realized I was physically attracted to her too. I've always felt a bit guilty about it, given that her late husband was a good friend, and she's still grieving. So I've kept these feelings to myself. Since the pandemic began, we've spent more time together due to social distancing and losing touch with others. Oh, we've never talked about anything romantic. And I try not to flirt, but last week, after the kids went to bed, I made us a few drinks, not enough to get drunk, and she decided to stay the night, so I slept on the couch. The next morning, I woke up to breakfast, and the 4 of us felt like the perfect family I've always wanted. She even kissed my forehead, which she doesn't usually do. I didn't say anything, but after she left, I found my son quietly playing with his toys in his room, looking upset. When I asked if he was okay, he told me straight up, like only a kid can, that he wishes my sister-in-law was his mom. I sat down with him and asked why he felt that way. And he listed several reasons. She's nice to him, never yells, and he enjoys seeing her at his grandparents' house. He also mentioned that they draw pictures together, which I didn't know. Hearing all this made my heart melt even more for her. When dropping the kids off at their grandparents', I tried to gauge their thoughts on the matter. I joked about my sister-in-law and me acting like a married couple sometimes, but they didn't laugh and seemed a bit distant, still friendly, but either they suspect something or disapprove. I can't ignore these feelings any longer, and becoming too difficult to pretend they don't affect me. I'm in love with her. I either need to put an end to these emotions and find a way to stop thinking about her, or I have to figure out how to navigate this situation and confess everything to her. If anyone has any advice on approaching a widow, especially one who was married to a friend with this kind of intention, I could really use your help. Not long after writing my initial post, I remembered that my kids would be spending Sunday night at their grandparents' house. And usually when this happens, my niece, my sister-in-law's daughter, joins them. I encourage these bi-weekly visits to help my children maintain a strong bond with their maternal grandparents. My sister-in-law allows her daughter to go because she loves playing with my daughter. That's when it hit me that we both have a free night. Normally, I just play video games or hit the gym, but I thought it would be an ideal chance to spend time with my sister-in-law without the kids around. So I texted her, "Hey, the kids are away this Sunday. How about we grabbed dinner?" I suggested a fairly upscale place that had reopened outdoor dining a couple of months ago. We'd never gone out to dinner before and were rarely alone together without a child nearby. She agreed, and my nerves kicked in as I realized I'd have to face my feelings. I asked if she'd prefer to meet at my place and take one car or meet at the restaurant, and she chose to come by my place first. I made an extra effort to look presentable dressing up, but not too much. When she arrived, she looked absolutely stunning in a beautiful evening dress and makeup. A departure from her usual look. I must have been speechless for a moment. We exchanged compliments and engaged in small talk. But I still hadn't mastered the courage to say anything, and she didn't push the issue. Dinner was fantastic, complete with a live jazz band. We both agreed it was our first adult social outing without our kids in years. We laughed, joked, and chatted, with some casual touching here and there. I couldn't find the courage to say anything, fearing I'd ruined the moment, so I just enjoyed myself. But as we were leaving, I decided to go for it. I offered her my arm, and we walked arm in arm to the car without any awkwardness or mention of it. I opened her door and planned to drive her back to her car. As I opened the door, she stopped me looking a bit nervous and told me she wanted to kiss me. There was no alcohol involved at dinner, so this was all her. I pulled her close, and we kissed. It's hard to describe how incredible it felt to finally touch her. We continued kissing outside the restaurant, leaning against my car for at least half an hour. Afterwards, we exchanged dreamy glances before getting in the car and driving back to my place. She held my hand while I drove, and I don't think I've ever been happier. I confessed that I'd had feelings for her for quite some time, but didn't want to scare her away. Given the difficult experiences we'd both been through, she revealed that she'd had feelings for me for about 6 months. Around that time, I'd gone on a few Tinder dates, and since we were just friends, I'd shared my disastrous experiences with her. She said she felt intensely jealous and angry that I was seeing other girls. And that's when she realized she developed feelings for me. It turns out I didn't approach her because of her late husband. And she didn't approach me because she feared I'd see too much of her sister, my ex-wife, in her, and eventually resent her for it. After arriving back at my place, we invited her in and chose to resist the urge to jump straight into bed. Instead, we sat on the couch, cuddling and discussing how to make this relationship work. There were some emotional moments. We touched on the topic of her late husband and her current stage in the grieving process. I assured her that I wouldn't rush her and that I'd wait as long as she needed. She said she felt ready to love again, and had moved past feeling guilty about her feelings for me, something she had struggled with. We discussed what we do if my ex ever reappeared or tried to re-enter my kid's life. What if she returned, reformed, and apologetic? Would I take her back? I told my sister-in-law that the answer was a firm no. I had forgiven my ex for cheating, but I could never forgive her for what she did to my son. He used to be a happy, cheerful boy before his mother started cheating, using pills and mistreating him. He's improved now, but his behavior and negativity at such a young age had been concerning. My sister-in-law worried about how he might react to her given that he's old enough to understand everything. I advised her not to mention it to him, but I shared that he had recently told me he wished his aunt or his mom We agreed to take things slow and not rush, but the kissing resumed, and since we were in private, we couldn't resist the temptation to head to the bedroom. I had fantasized about her for a long time. And finally, I got to experience waking up beside her. Moving forward, we plan to establish date nights and continue building on our already solid foundation. When the time comes to tell our families that we're a couple, we'll do it together. After 2 years of wishing she was mine, she finally is. I better not mess this up. I should mention that I've been referring to my ex-wife as Natalie and my sister-in-law as Sandra. We've shared the news with everyone. And overall, the reactions have been pretty positive. Sandra and I visited my parents when our kids were with my in-laws. My parent Burns had met Sandra a few times, but didn't know her very well since our families rarely attended the same events. They recognized her though. My dad isn't the sentimental type. So I'm not sure what he thinks, but my mom is supportive. She asked if Natalie knew, and we told her we hadn't spoken to her in years and would deal with that when the time came. My parents seemed happy for us. We attended a small Labor Day gathering at my in-laws' place, knowing the reception might be cooler since they're also related to my ex-wife. My parents took the kids to the zoo and for ice cream, so it was just Sandra and me at the party. When we arrived, everyone asked about the kids. Despite my nerves, I took Sandra's hand, and we announced that we were a couple. The response was mostly positive, with several of her aunts expressing their happiness. At first, no one mentioned my ex-wife, and they seemed glad that Sandra was dating again. The only issue came from my mother-in-law, who claimed she knew we were together because of the way I looked at Sandra and how much Sandra talked about me. She jokingly accused us of sneaking off to kiss at a pool party in June. After the party, Sandra's parents asked to speak with us. They inquired about the seriousness of our relationship and whether Natalie knew. When I said no and that her opinion shouldn't matter. Since she abandoned her family 4 years ago, they expressed their preference for me to inform Natalie that I was dating her sister. They feared that a sober and reformed Natalie might return, try to make amends, discover my relationship with Sandra, and relapse. It turned out they had been in contact with Natalie for a year, but hadn't told me. Sandra was upset because Natalie never reached out to her after her husband's passing. They showed me Natalie's Facebook profile, which she had blocked me from, and she looked normal, not like the person she was when she left. Seeing her like that made Sandra and me feel a bit better. Her parents kept their contact with Natalie a secret because she felt ashamed and believed she deserved to lose her kids. They gave me her phone number and asked me to call her. I assured them that my feelings for Sandra were genuine and that there was no chance of reconciling with Natalie. My father-in-law seemed to approve, but my mother-in-law appeared to be hoping for a reconciliation. After leaving, Sandra and I discussed the situation, revisiting the possibility of Natalie's return in light of these new revelations. I told Sandra that I loved her deeply, and that my feelings for her were stronger than anything I ever felt for my ex-wife. Sandra cried, stressed by the situation, angry at her parents for keeping secrets and upset with her sister for not contacting her after her husband's passing. She admitted fearing that I might leave her if Natalie returned, but I reassured her that would never happen. It took some long hugs and many kisses to smooth things over. But by the time we picked up the kids, we were holding hands and feeling closer than ever. Sandra has been spending the night at my place quite often since we got together. To keep the kids from noticing, I've been setting my alarm for 4 a.m., getting up and moving to the couch. The morning after we decided to tell the kids, our daughters seemed happy, though they're too young to fully understand the situation. I took my son aside and asked for his thoughts. He asked if we'd all be living together someday, and if Sandra would now be his stepmom. I told him he could call her whatever he felt comfortable with, and we'd both respect his choice because we love him. So we started asking me a bunch of questions about his mom. Stuff he's never asked before. I tried my best to answer everything truthfully, but I did hold back a bit on some of the more sensitive details. He's had some education on the dangers prescription pills from school, so I was finally honest with him, to a certain extent. I explained that his mom had a problem and made some poor decisions that led to her current situation. Wow, that's a tough conversation to have. He asked me why his own mother didn't seem to care about him, and it just hurt my heart to hear him say that. I did my best to reassure him that his mother did love him. But she had made some really bad choices, and sometimes grown-ups don't do the right thing. Then he asked me if I still loved his mom, which was a hard question to answer. I explained that I wanted his mom to get better and be healthy, but the things she did hurt both of us so much that it's hard to love her like I used to. I'm not entirely certain he grasped the concept, but I did my best to clarify it for him. Despite that, Sandra's presence has had a remarkable impact on him. He's noticeably more content and engaged, actively seeking out opportunities to impress her with the same childhood antics I once did with my own mother. Of course, still have that dreaded phone call with my ex to look forward to at the end of the day. However, having Sandra here with me, being able to hold her and feel her warmth at night, brings a sense of happiness back into my life that I haven't felt in a very long time. I never realized just how unhappy I was until she came into my life and made me feel truly happy. We've been doing all the lovey-dovey things that young couples do. She's been leaving me sweet love letters in my lunchbox at work and even writing little poems for me. As for me, I've been sending her flowers at her workplace to show her how much I appreciate her. Apparently, a few of her coworkers have been trying to set us up for a while, so I thought the flowers would be a great way to thank her and give a little wink to those office girls. So back in September, I had a chat with my ex-wife. She's doing much better these days. She's been in recovery for 8 months now. She finally opened up to me about the affair and how she got into pills. Honestly, it was tough to hear all the details, but I'm happy she's trying to get her life back on track. I still don't approve of what she did to me and the kids. But I really want her to be healthy. Sometimes I can't help but worry about her. It's probably silly of me, but she'll always be a part of my life. You know? Anyway, I finally got around to telling her about Sandra and me, and she was completely shocked by it. When I first met my ex-girlfriend, she was only 18 years old, and Sandra was just 15. In my ex's mind, Sandra was always just a kid to me. And to be fair, I did refer to her as my kid's sister at times. However, my ex remembered that Sandra is now a fully grown adult who is married and has a child of her own. So she stopped insinuating that I was a creep. She did ask me if I had feelings for Sandra while I was still married, but I denied it. We also talked about the kids, and my ex was really regretful and crying throughout the conversation. She has no idea how she'll be able to face them again. I wanted to say something reassuring, but I don't want to give her the wrong impression that I want her back in our lives. I'll be cordial and friendly, but I won't be foolish. So me and Sandra were having a good chat the other day. I wasn't trying to be nosy or anything, but I couldn't help but overhear some of their conversation. It seems like they were talking about Sandra's husband, who my ex has apparently been up to no good with. Long story short, my ex got himself arrested for breaking and entering and spent a few days in the slammer. Sandra didn't even know that he had passed until a couple of weeks after the funeral. She didn't want to say anything because she thought it would just make things worse. Anyway, on a brighter note, things have been going pretty well with Sandra, her 3 kids, and myself. We've been spending a lot of time together, and it's been such a blast. My son and daughter are loving all the attention they're getting, and I'm having a great time learning more about my little niece. Life's definitely busy, but it's good. To be honest, not much has changed since my last comment. If you have any questions or comments for me, feel free to ask, and I'll do my best to respond as soon as I can. However, I must warn you that my workload has increased quite a bit during the season, so I won't be able to be on here as much as I was before. On a more personal note, I just have to say how happy I am with my romantic partner. It had been so long since I had been with someone that I had forgotten what it felt like to be in and feel loved. But now that I am, it's crazy to think how lonely and miserable I was before. Heck, we even played Scrabble last night, and it made me ridiculously happy. It's hard to believe that almost a year has passed since my former sister-in-law, Sandra, started dating, but now here we are living together and happier than ever. We're actually on the hunt for a new home, which is super exciting. The best part is that our kids are reaping the benefits of having two parents who are totally invested in their well-being. Our daughters have even started referring to each other as sisters. And my son is just as much a part of the family as anyone else. It's funny though. When he talks to his friends or teacher, he calls Sandra Mom. But when he's talking to her directly, he still refers to her as Auntie, and our daughters call me Uncle too. It definitely throws some people for a loop, but it makes for a great conversation starter. I haven't really spoken to my ex-wife much lately. But we've heard through the grapevine that she's doing much better. Apparently, she's landed herself a pretty decent job, snagged a boyfriend, and is managing to keep herself out of trouble. As much as I hate to admit it, the idea of her coming back into my children's lives isn't completely off the table. I mean, if she continues to keep herself on the straight and narrow, it's going to be a lot harder for me to deny her visitation rights. This isn't just a matter of what's legal, but it's also a matter of doing what's right. Sandra and I aren't exactly thrilled about the prospect of her re-entering our lives, but it's not like it's going to happen anytime soon. We got other things to worry about for now. Sandra and I were worried that my ex would come back into our lives, but luckily, my parents have stopped meddling and haven't pushed for it. Now our kids spend weekends with them, which gives us a chance to have some quality time together. We get to go on dates and enjoy each other's company on Friday nights, Saturdays. Our friends were pretty surprised by all this, but they've been super supportive. They don't really talk about my ex, but sometimes it comes up. Mostly, everybody's just thrilled that we're finally happy together. Oh, I forgot to tell you about one side of her family, her late husband's family. Her daughter, as you can imagine, still meets up with them frequently. And they are totally cool with our relationship. In fact, her father-in-law straight up told me that he's happy it's me because he was afraid his granddaughter would be exposed to a weirdo if his daughter-in-law brought someone else into her life. Due to the pandemic, we haven't been able to get together with them as much as we'd like. But the few times we have hung out, they've been there and always will be. Sandra and I have had many heart-to-hearts about her late husband. Despite our deep and wonderful love for each other, we both acknowledge that his memory and presence will always be an integral part of our lives. In fact, Sandra even invited me to one of her therapy sessions to discuss our feelings. Out of respect for me, Sandra made the decision to remove her wedding band, which understandably caused her a great deal of sadness. However, I reassured her that she didn't need to do this and even joked that if we were to get married, she's got two hands to wear rings on. As a compromise, she now wears her wedding band on a necklace and has replaced it with an engagement ring on her finger. While I don't have an elaborate engagement story to share, I can tell you that there were plenty of tears, hugs and kisses when I asked Sandra to marry me.